I never thought of myself as the jealous type. In fact, I prided myself on being the opposite: confident, secure, and trusting. Luke Gardner and I had built something steady, something mature. We were both in our late 20s, each with our own careers and a shared apartment that felt more like a home every day. Our relationship was the kind that didn't need constant checking in. We communicated when we needed to, gave each other space when we wanted it. Trust, I believed, was the cornerstone of a relationship like ours. That's why, when I received the text from Luke asking me to drop off his laptop charger at his office on a random Tuesday morning, I didn't think twice. He was busy at work, I knew that much. I was just finishing up some freelance work from home, so it seemed like a small favour. His office was about a 20-minute drive, tucked in a modern glass building in the downtown business district. I parked in the lot, checked the address again, and walked up the polished steps, my heels clicking against the stone. I had never been to Luke's office. His work was important to him, but I had always respected his boundaries. He never pushed me to meet his colleagues, and I didn't press him about it. So when I walked through the doors, I was immediately struck by the sterile, corporate vibe. Grey walls, minimalist decor, and the quiet buzz of phones and computers. I stood at the reception desk waiting for the woman behind it to notice me. She was busy typing, her focus elsewhere. When she finally looked up, she gave me a polite smile. "Can I help you?" "Hi, I'm Emma Brooks. I'm here to drop off a laptop charger for Luke Gardner," I said, feeling a little out of place. Her expression faltered just for a moment. It wasn't a big change, just a slight hesitation, before she smiled again. "Oh yes, Luke's office is just down the hall. You can leave it with Sophie. She'll get it to him." I followed her directions, my footsteps echoing in the quiet space. As I reached Luke's office, I was about to knock when I heard voices from the other side of the door. One of them was unmistakably Luke's. The other, I wasn't sure, but it sounded like laughter, casual and warm, like the kind you'd have with a friend. I paused for a moment, debating whether to knock or just leave the charger on the desk. The conversation inside shifted, and I heard Sophie's voice, Luke's coworker. I'd heard him mention her a few times before, always in passing. "Luke, I swear you're going to regret it," Sophie's voice carried through the thin walls, teasing. Luke's response was muffled, but I could hear the hint of amusement in his tone. "Nah, you're just jealous." I smiled a little, feeling oddly relieved, but then Sophie said something that caught me off guard. "So, how's he doing after the party?" I froze, my hand still poised to knock. What party? I cleared my throat, trying to ignore the rising tension in my chest. I knocked, lightly, and the door swung open. Sophie's eyes widened for a moment, clearly surprised to see me. "Oh, Emma, I didn't know you were coming by." I smiled stiffly. "Yeah, just dropping off Luke's charger. He forgot it at home this morning." She looked away for a moment and I noticed how tense she was. Something was off. Sure, you can leave it with me. Luke's in a meeting right now." I nodded, handing her the charger, but I couldn't shake the nagging question from my mind. What party? Sophie's unease lingered in her eyes and I couldn't help but ask, "What party are you talking about?" Her expression flickered and for a moment I almost thought she was going to tell me something, but then she forced a smile, shrugging as if it were nothing. "Oh, nothing really, just some work thing. I was just messing with him." I nodded, trying to brush it off, but my stomach churned. The way she had said it, so casually, like there was nothing unusual about it, only made me feel more unsettled. Why hadn't Luke told me about a work retreat? Why hadn't he mentioned anything about a party? I left the office, my mind racing. Sophie's strange slip of the tongue had planted a seed of doubt. I told myself I was overthinking it. There had to be a reasonable explanation. But something inside me couldn't let it go. I didn't confront Luke immediately. Instead, I went home and sat down at my desk, pretending to focus on my own work. but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The nagging thought kept looping in my mind. What party? Hours later, when Luke still hadn't texted me, I found myself standing in front of the TV, mindlessly scrolling through my phone. I couldn't help myself. I opened the Photos app. I found a few old pictures from weekends past, including a recent photo of Luke and me at a friend's wedding. We looked so happy, so in love. Then I stumbled across a video that made my heart stop. It was a clip from the retreat. Luke was in it, dancing in a crowded room. His face was alight with laughter, his eyes shining in a way that I hadn't seen in weeks. But it wasn't just him. A woman stood next to him, her hands on his waist as they swayed together. The way they moved, it didn't look like just a work event. It looked like something more. I watched the video, my hand trembling, my breath catching in my throat. I replayed it again, the faces of the people in the background blurred by the poor quality. But that one moment, Luke, his smile wide, dancing intimately with her, haunted me. I didn't know what to think anymore. All of a sudden, the steady, calm relationship I thought I understood felt like a fragile house of cards, ready to collapse with the smallest nudge. I stared at the screen, trying to make sense of what I had just seen, but nothing made sense, and that's when I decided to leave. Leaving was almost too easy. I didn't plan it that way. In fact, I hadn't planned anything. But once the video of Luke dancing with that woman had seared into my mind, I could no longer stay in that apartment. I couldn't stay in that life. My mind raced with 1,000 different thoughts, disbelief, anger, confusion, but the one emotion that stuck was a quiet, determined certainty. I needed to leave, to breathe, to think. So that's exactly what I did. I packed up my things quietly. I didn't need much, just the basics. A few changes of clothes, my toiletries, and the laptop I worked from. I didn't even make a sound as I slipped out the door, leaving Luke's world behind. There were no dramatic goodbyes, no heated confrontations, just silence. The kind that had settled between us long before I decided to leave. I wasn't sure where I would go, but I didn't care. I needed distance. Luke, for all his imperfections, wasn't a monster. He wasn't the kind of person who deserved to be torn apart with accusations and finger-pointing. At least, not yet. I wasn't sure I even wanted to confront him. For a few days I stayed with a friend from college, someone who didn't ask too many questions. I just needed the space, the quiet. The first night was the worst. I had trouble falling asleep, my mind racing through everything I thought I knew about Luke, about myself. I couldn't stop thinking about that video, the way his hands had rested on her waist so comfortably, the way his laugh had sounded more genuine with her than with me. The silence in that room felt louder than any argument we could have had. Then came the messages. They started small. Apologies, confused texts, Luke asking if I was okay, if I was upset. He seemed genuinely worried, but there was an edge to his words that felt rehearsed, like he wasn't sure what kind of apology I wanted to hear. He was wrong. There was no apology that could fix this. I wasn't angry at him, at least not in the way he thought I was. I was angry at myself. How had I been so blind? How had I let myself trust someone so completely? But I didn't respond. I didn't call him. I didn't answer his texts. I just sat in the quiet of my friend's apartment, alone with my thoughts. Day after day, Luke's messages grew more desperate. At first, he had asked if I wanted to talk, if he could come over. Then he shifted, begging me to come back, to reconsider. I could almost hear the panic in his words, though he was careful not to make it too obvious. He blamed the alcohol, the retreat, the stress at work, every excuse but the truth. But I couldn't tell him the truth yet, not until I figured out what I needed to do with the truth I had found. I started to think about everything, our history, the promises we'd made, the way we'd always been real with each other. But now the image of him with that woman was all I could see. The reality I'd trusted had cracked open, and I couldn't glue it back together. It felt insufficient to confront him. To ask him, "What is this?" was to reduce myself to someone seeking validation. I wasn't that person anymore. The real question was, what did I want? What did I need? I didn't have an answer yet, but I knew it wasn't him. By the end of the week, I felt the urge to go back. Not to him, but to the apartment. I told myself it was just to get a few more things. My mind had been quiet for too long. I needed to face it, to go back to the place where everything had started unraveling. I needed to confront the silence and the uncertainty. The apartment still smelled like us, like home. Luke's things were scattered around, a mess of jackets, shoes, and books. His laptop sat on the coffee table where I'd left it, untouched. It was like the space had been waiting for me to come back. I walked through the rooms, touching things that no longer held the same meaning. His favourite mug, my makeup bag on the bathroom counter, a photograph of us on the mantel taken just a month ago on a lazy Sunday morning. We were smiling at something off camera. It was one of those photos where everything seemed perfect. But it wasn't, was it? I felt like I was choking, caught in the space between who I was and who I had been. Just as I was about to gather up a few more clothes, my phone buzzed. Luke. I glanced at the message, a single line of text. "Please, Emma, we need to talk. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The words hung there like an open door. The invitation was clear. Come back. Let me explain. I couldn't. I wouldn't. But still, the silence between us, the distance I had created, was unbearable. The message was followed by another one, a little more frantic. "I didn't mean to hurt you. Please, I'll explain everything. Just come home." I took a deep breath, staring at the screen. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, torn between replying and blocking him completely. I couldn't respond, not yet. It would only drag this out longer. He wanted me to return, to give him a chance to spin his story, to reclaim what he had lost. But I wasn't interested in playing his game. I wasn't here for his explanations, not anymore. But the part of me that had once loved him, the part that remembered when this felt real, wanted to give him one last chance to tell me what happened. I wanted the answers. I couldn't give him that satisfaction. Instead, I left the apartment and drove to a small cafe. I didn't need to hear his explanations. What I needed was clarity. I needed to understand what came next, and I needed to be strong enough to walk away completely. So I sat in the cafe, the quiet hum of voices around me, and waited for the answers to come to me. Maybe not from him, but from within. The days blurred together. Luke's messages slowed down, then stopped entirely. But the silence that followed felt heavier than any argument we could have had. It was suffocating in a way that I hadn't anticipated. My mind kept returning to that first moment of doubt, the slip of Sophie's words, the way they rattled in my chest like an alarm I couldn't shut off. The video was still there, always on the edge of my thoughts, playing like a loop I couldn't escape. But as time passed, I started to see things more clearly. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. It was hard to admit, even to myself. The idea of leaving Luke, of cutting ties after everything we'd shared, was painful. But it was also the only option left. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. The life I had thought I was living wasn't real. Not the way I had believed it was. It wasn't just the video or the slip-up with Sophie. It was everything. The subtle ways he'd pulled back over the last few months, the late nights at work, the way he always seemed just a little too distant, a little too distracted. He'd checked out long before I had. and I had been too blind to see it, but I saw it now. It wasn't about betrayal in the way I'd once thought. I didn't care about the specifics of the affair, not really. It wasn't about punishment or revenge either. The truth was, I was grieving the loss of the illusion. I was grieving what I thought we had, what I thought I could count on. And I was finally ready to let go of that. I spent the following week in the quiet of my own space, sorting through my thoughts and emotions, with a calm I hadn't expected. I found a small apartment downtown, far enough from the old neighbourhood to feel like I was starting fresh, but close enough to everything that I didn't feel completely lost. I spent days arranging furniture, picking out plants and unpacking my things. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like peace settle in me. I thought about Luke only when I had to. I thought about how, despite everything, I had loved him. I thought about the promises we'd made to each other and how, over time, those promises had become nothing more than words, hollowed out by my own doubt and his indifference. The hardest part wasn't leaving. It was realizing that I didn't need his explanation to understand the truth. The truth was already inside me, in the silence I'd carved out of the wreckage. I didn't need him to rewrite it. A month passed. The messages stopped coming. There was no apology, no attempt to repair what had been broken. In some way, it was a relief. I knew now that any attempt at closure would be futile. It would have been for him, not for me. And then, one evening, as I was sitting on the couch in my new apartment, a knock on the door pulled me from my thoughts. I opened it to find a small package lying on the welcome mat. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt the cold fingers of dread grip my chest for a moment. I knew exactly what it was. It was from Luke. I hadn't heard from him in weeks, but I knew this wasn't an accident. I picked it up, staring at the small cardboard box for a long moment. It felt like a test, like a final challenge that he'd thrown my way. I opened it slowly, the paper inside crinkling under my fingers. The box was filled with familiar objects, things I had left behind. My favourite scarf, the old photos from trips we'd taken together. And then, at the bottom, a small note, folded neatly. I hesitated before reading it, but then I unfolded the paper and saw his handwriting. I know I can't undo what I've done, and I can't fix this, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. What I did was wrong. I should have been honest with you from the beginning. I never wanted to hurt you. I just couldn't figure out how to say it, how to tell you the truth. But I will always love you, and I hope someday you'll understand. I read the note once, then again, but the words felt weightless, like they had no impact on me. I didn't feel the rush of emotion I expected. I didn't feel relief or anger or even sadness. What I felt was nothing. The truth was I'd already let him go, and in the silence that followed, I realised that I was the one who had the final say. I put the note back in the box, closed it, and set it aside. There was no need to respond, no need to explain myself any further. I wasn't waiting for an apology anymore. I wasn't waiting for him to fix things. I had already fixed myself. I had come to terms with the fact that I didn't need to understand why he'd done what he did. I didn't need to know the full story, the details of the retreat or how far it had gone. I didn't need to hear it from him. What I needed was to reclaim my own narrative, to take back my power. I stood up, walked to the window and looked out at the city below me. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden light over the skyline. The light, the air, the space around me, all of it was mine now. And for the first time in a long while, I felt free. The past was behind me, and in the quiet of my own space, I understood something I hadn't before. Revenge wasn't about punishing him. It was about freeing myself. As I watched the day turn to night, I knew I had already won. The silence was mine now, and in it I was whole.